Good morning, everyone. My name is Arjik Dirk Nowitsky Biigot, and for today, we will be looking into one transactional model of communication, which is Dance's helical model of communication. We will get to know its history, how it came to be, what's its purpose, what it is, and at the end, I will be giving an example of one. Let's get started. Frank Dance's helical model of communication was initially published in his 1967 book titled Human Communication Theory. In there, he intended this model of communication to be a response and an improvement over linear and circular models by emphasizing the dynamic nature of communication and how it changes the participants. Dan sees the fault of linear models as their attempt to understand communication as a linear flow of messages from a sender to a receiver. According to him, this fault is avoided by circular models, which included a feedback loop through which messages are exchanged back and forth. Dance criticizes the circular approach by holding that it suggests that communication comes back full circle to exactly the same point from which it started. Now, what we can get from this information is that Frank Dance really despises the linear and circular models, that he made a model himself that he thinks it's better. Now, I've said all these background information of the model, but what does it actually look like? Here it is. This is Dance's helical model. As the name suggests, it is helical, which means it is shaped like a helix. But then, what is a helix? It is an object that is three-dimensional like that of a wire wound, a wire which is bent, to uniformly coil around, forming a cone-like shape. What we can get from this is that Dance's helical model understands communication in analogy to an upward moving and widening helix. Dance thinks that a helix is a better representation of the process of communication since it implies that there is always a forward movement. It shows how the content and structure of earlier communication influences the content and structure of later communication. In this regard, we see that communication has a lasting effect on the communicators and progresses continuously as a process. The upward widening movement of the helix represents a form of optimistic views of communication, as it evolves by seeing communication as a means of growth, learning, and improvement. Now that we know Dance's helical model of communication, let us look at an example of this bizarre communication model. This is a theory of Dance's helical model. Emphasizes the difficulty of communication. Frank Dance uses the form of a helix to describe communication process. He developed this theory based on a simple helix which gets bigger and bigger as it moves or grows. The main characteristic of a helical model of communication is that it is evolutionary. Now let's get to the example. Example. When a child is born, the only means of communication for him is crying. He cries for everything like hunger, pain, cold, etc. And then when the same child grows up and starts going to school, she soon interacts with his parents, teachers, and friends in the form of word, saying in a sentence. What we can get from this example is that when the child was a baby, he only knows how to communicate by crying. And the baby keeps doing it because if he cries, the parents will come and try to calm the baby down. Then, as the baby grows up and becomes a kid and goes to school, he learns how to talk and communicate to his or her parents by saying it word for word of what he wants. We can see the growth from this example, and this is why Frank Dance thinks his communication model is leaps and bounds much better than the linear and circular models. That is all for my reporting. Now let us hear from Blanche Layson as she unravels more about Dance's helical model.